Good morning, good morning. Thank you, good morning. I'm afraid that our spoken word artist has not yet arrived, so I will not take that role. Nobody needs to hear that first thing in the morning, but if Cornelius does make it, he's on the way. All right, well, we'll try to squeeze in some time at the back end so we can really enjoy some incredible talent from this area as we've been benefiting from all week. So good morning, everyone. My name is Meg Long. I'm with Equal Measure. We're the evaluation partner here for the Aspen OIF. And I'm really impressed to see all of you here this morning at 8 o'clock to talk about data. It's a hot topic. Everybody's doing it. I understand actually that we're in stiff competition to the Social Innovation Fund conversation that's happening upstairs. So it quite is a hot topic for us this morning. But I'm honored to be standing here with you, and we're going to have an incredible panel discussion in a little bit as the lights turn brighter. I understand this is getting filmed, so we're on the hot spot. I'm also honored to say that Equal Measure has been part of this family for almost 5 years. We've been working in partnership with the OIF communities as the evaluation partner through the first year of planning and 3 years of implementation. And for those of you that have had a chance to either listen to some of our findings or read our reports, we have incredible momentum in this network. And, you know, reflecting back over the past 3 years of implementation, I will say that I think there are some findings that we are seeing, some true systemic shifts happening in the sector that feel accelerated to us. We do a lot of work on systems change strategies, and the work that you've tackled over the last 3 years does feel rapidly accelerating. So, you know, we know from our work that over the last 3 years, the OIF communities have truly increased accountability to the Opportunity Youth agenda across partners. We know that you have successfully reframed the narrative around Opportunity Youth from a deficit-based narrative mere 4 years ago to one that focuses on the assets of Opportunity Youth and the systemic nature of the barriers that are in their way for success. We know that you have increased both the number and the quality of pathways. Your work touches over 27,000 youth directly, and the systems that you're working with are touching about 97,000 young people out there. Yes, thank you. Right? Incredible. That's right. We also know that you've really begun to integrate elements of best practices, whether it's the Back on Track model or other full wraparound services and supports, to really increase the quality of programming to our young people and really help, as John Powell said yesterday, really help smooth the pathways for many of our young people in our communities. So we're at a tipping point. Right? So some of these systems are really beginning to shift or at least bend, right? And we're watching these systemic shifts and tracking some of the policy changes that are happening both within your partner institutions, but also some of the rules and regulations that you've begun to change in your communities. We're also tracking some changes in public policy. Over half of the OIF communities have affected a local or state level policy. That's nothing to bat your eyes at for a 3-year initiative. So the momentum is mounting. And yesterday, John Powell really challenged us to think about setting a goal, right? And a universal goal. And we've been really good at using data thus far, right, to understand the needs of our Opportunity Youth, to begin to find where they are, what needs they have, to begin to track their progress along various pathways. But we can do more. And as Steve yesterday sort of framed up the next wave, if you will, of the OI network, our sense is that there is real opportunity, here's a Steveism, to double down on what we're referring to as quality measures and population level outcomes. Really to think together as a network how we set a universal goal, and then more importantly perhaps, to think about how we begin to smooth those pathways, how we begin to look at the unique needs and assets of various target populations within our communities to really meet them where they are. This is not something that's easy. It's technically hard, and it's adaptively maybe even harder. But we need, as a network, to have strong data, strong metrics, and strong narratives, both for case making, for tracking our progress and tracking our outcomes, for improving our work as we go, but also for mobilizing the very people, whether they be policymakers, stakeholders, our leaders in the communities, our young people. We need data to help drive the momentum behind the systems change agenda that we've been pursuing and we've been succeeding at. There's a couple of caveats here, though, that I want to offer, and this is not going to be a panel about the technical difficulties of getting systems to share data, although we can talk about that a little bit. I want to offer a couple of caveats in the data conversation. The first is we do not want to, nor will we, privilege certain types of data over others. We will not privilege quantitative data over qualitative data. And we will not privilege different sources of data. Just because it's coming from an administrative database does not make it more powerful or important than coming from a focus group with youth leaders. So we want to make sure that we strike the right balance in our narrative and data story between administrative outcomes data, population level data, and the intricate, delicate stories of the young people that are in those numbers. And we'll have an opportunity to dive into that a little bit more with our panel. The second is data ownership. We need to make sure that data stories, outcomes, are truly respectful and trusted by who they represent. Okay, the data are not owned by an institution. They are owned by the people who live those data points daily. We have to be very careful about data ownership. And the third is many of the communities that we're working with, many communities of color and marginalized communities in this country, Native and tribal communities, have been hyper-studied and punitively treated by data points. Okay? That is not our position. When we talk about looking at data as part of our equity agenda, we want to be hypersensitive to the histories and the cultural relevance and cultural respect that we have to put forth as we think about data use. So I just wanted to offer those few caveats as we think about the data conversation, because nationally, when we talk about big data, many of those caveats get quickly lost. So I'd like for you to help in welcoming our panelists today. We're gonna try to organize this as a discussion. And the way that we've organized our panelists is to give you a little bit of a national perspective, and then of course a local perspective, including that of a youth leader, so that we can begin to think about, as we go to this next stage of our movement, as we think about that targeted universal goal, we have a lot of lessons to draw from. So I'd like to welcome to the stage Jennifer Blatz. She is the president and CEO of the StriveTogether Network, a national cradle-to-career organization, and Jennifer and I have a long-standing history together. She'll share some perspectives about the evolution of the StriveTogether work, and especially the recent more pointed focus on equity. Linda Gibbs, who is the principal with Bloomberg Associates, also a long-standing friend and a hiking partner from Aspen. Linda has been working with mayors across the country to think about collecting data and information, particularly around issues related to boys and men of color and the role that mayors and civic leaders can play in helping to support that agenda. Dr. Shelby Cooley, who's a research scientist with the Community Center for Education Results, is I will say, a personal intellectual crush for me. And this is the first opportunity that I get to meet Shelby in person. She has been charting an incredible data course, if you will, for the community here in South King County. And with Dr. Cooley is Hikma Shurka, who is our youth leader from the King County Youth Advisory Council. And Hikma has played an instrumental role in advancing the narrative and humanizing the data that many of the civic leaders here in King County are looking at. And finally, Geneva Wicki, who's representing our Norte County and Tribal Lands and is also a member of the California Endowment, who will speak a little bit to us about the importance of applying a culturally respectful lens to data collection and use in tribal communities. So with that, I'm going to take a seat and we're going to get our conversation started. Just a little bit about logistics. It's really hard to get these things conversational with a room this size. What we've asked our panelists to do is just do a quick sort of 5 to 7 minute discussion about their aspect of the data story. We do have some slides. Please take notes along the way. Think about what resonates, what you want to follow up on. Depending on our time, we'll either have a moment to sort of gather your questions before we dive into a discussion here at the panel, or we'll have some tabletop discussions. So the goal here is really aha moments, lessons, tools, and follow-up questions that you have as we listen to our panelists. Okay.
Great. Well, thank you. It's great to be here, Meg, and it's interesting because I have been in conversations with the leaders of this network for many years. We've been on a parallel path as we figure out our data journey, and so to have this opportunity to share some fail-forwards and lessons learned from the StriveTogether network as we've been on this data and equity journey is an honor and a privilege, and I look forward to the conversation. So for those of you who don't know StriveTogether, we are a national network of 69 cradle-to-career partnerships across 30 states, convening more than 10,000 organizations and impacting more than 10 million students. And we have been doing this work for more than a decade. I actually got my start in Cincinnati with the Strive Local Partnership back in 2006 when we looked at the data in Cincinnati and Northern Kentucky and decided that we really needed to improve outcomes and we wanted to take a different approach. No more programs. We, as it was said on a panel yesterday, one of my favorite sayings, and we've said this for years, is we are program rich, but systems poor. And we started with the goal to improve outcomes from cradle to career and no plan, no idea how to do it, and have learned over the last year, or the last 10 years, 10 plus years, about what that looks like. And so to be able to talk a little bit about that today is great. Our network is united by these, let's see if I can get my slides going here. There we go. These 7 outcomes. So it's been 6 up until more recently with our new strategic plan, and now 7. We've added employment. So all kids are ready by kindergarten. All kids are reading at grade level by 3rd grade, achieving middle grade math outcomes, high school graduation, college enrollment, college completion, and now employment. And as you'll hear in a minute, all of our work has been driven by our network members. And as for years, we struggled with how do we measure employment? And we realized it was really work avoidance. We cannot let perfect be the enemy of good. We are about cradle to career work, and we heard from our network members, we can figure out how to measure employment just as we're figuring out how to measure early childhood education. And so we have expanded our roadmap that unites our network of 69 partnerships. The other piece that unites our network is our theory of action. And I don't expect you to, this is, my predecessor used to say this is not a first date type of document. And so I would agree that if you look at this, it's a little overwhelming. And if you can believe it, this is the abbreviated version. But our theory of action is a roadmap for building civic infrastructure. And if you're really interested in all of the benchmarks, you can go to our website and you can find that. But we built this theory of action with our network. And at that time, it was 2013, there were more than 100 cradle-to-career partnerships talking about doing this work, the four pillars of our work, our approach to collective impact, which is building a shared community vision, evidence-based decision-making, collaborative action, and investment in sustainability. And at that time, what we found is that we really wanted to put a greater emphasis on the importance of data and data-driving decision-making. And we had more than 100 partnerships who were part of our network, and when we built this theory of action, we said we were going to assess our partnerships annually against the theory of action. And when we did that first assessment, we dropped down to 49 partnerships. And now we're back up to 69 partnerships. And we've been above 70 and we go back down. And the idea here is that our work it's always been about every child cradle to career. And that in itself is inherently an equity statement. And for us, if we are not digging into the data and using data to drive every decision that we're making, then we're not going to get to every child cradle to career. And so when I think back to when we were building this theory of action and really working with our network members to do this, there was one benchmark that was a sticking point for many of our partnerships who were at the table who were saying, I don't know if I can do that. And this was several years ago. And to think of where we've come, which I'll talk about in a minute, is amazing. But it's in the emerging, again, I'm getting into the weeds here in our jargon, our StriveTogether jargon, which where there's a lot of it, as Meg well knows. But it's about disaggregating data. And so this was several years ago, we were talking about every partnership to be a part of the StriveTogether network and to advance across to what we're ultimately trying to get to, which is what we call proof point, which I'll talk about in a minute, is you have to publicly disaggregate data. And that was so hard for many of the communities in our network. They said, we will never make it past the emerging gateway of our theory of action. And to see some of the partnerships be able to push one another and that peer learning that I see happening across this conference and what we experience in our network and getting to where we are now. And I do have to credit, it's great to be on this panel with Shelby because I can recall being at the table with Mary Jean Ryan from the Roadmap Project and others who were saying we have to put a stake in the ground. We have to talk about publicly disaggregating data. And so we got to that place several years ago. But at that same time, we were defining what proof point means to us. And for us, that is about partnerships who get to proof point. So if you get across that theory of action, you're named proof point, and you've demonstrated that you have at least 60% of outcomes trending across those 7 outcome areas that I shared with you, and that you have examples of systems change. The problem with our current definition of proof point is that it's outcomes in aggregate. And so we didn't get as explicit, and this was a lot of debate in our network, explicit about closing gaps, eliminating disparities. We've been talking about systems change, breaking down systems and the structural racism that Dr. Powell was talking about yesterday is absolutely what we've been talking about, but we haven't been able to be as explicit as a network until now. And when I talk in a few minutes about our new strategic plan, you'll hear how we're thinking about that. So again, we're on a very similar journey to this network, and it will be great to be peers as we move in this direction. So very quickly, I have way too many slides. I'm going to breeze through them. And if you have questions, you can ask me later. But our improvement approach, and this has been an evolution as well. I mentioned data-driven decision-making, evidence-based decision-making as being one of our 4 pillars. And we have really evolved to look at how to use data to get to what are the core factors that impact the outcomes we're getting to. And this has been an evolution. We started with a very rigorous approach to continuous quality improvement as one element for using data. But as Meg just shared, we cannot look at just one source of data or one way of looking at data. We have to evolve our approach to using data. And so we have more recently looked at human-centered design and design thinking and brought that approach into our work. Named an equity lens as we look at data and work with our partnerships to build their capability to use data. And then a tremendous influence for our work has been the Annie E. Casey Foundation and their results count leadership work, because as all of you know, when you're sitting in a room with different stakeholders and looking at data, it requires that type of adaptive leadership. What we're trying to get to with systems change is behavior change. Systems are made up of people. You have to change people. That takes adaptive leadership. So we're thankful for the Annie Casey Foundation and their tremendous influence on our work and that results count work. And that has really put together our improvement approach. And with that, I want to mention that we're using data in real time. With all due respect to RCTs and quasi-experimental, we feel a sense of urgency. We don't have that time. We believe in that work, but right now our communities are looking at what is the data that we can get in real time, how do we use it to make change and to change systems in real time. So that's PDSA cycles, plan, do, study, act, use the data you have, do what you can with, we'll make it better, we'll get better data, but we have to use it in real time. And again, too much for a slide, but this is just, I have 2 quick examples of how communities are using data. So this is all hands raised in Multnomah County in Oregon. And just as an example, using data as a flashlight to uncover what are the interventions that work and how do we scale those interventions. And so what we quickly learned is if we can help partnerships look at what are the contributing indicators. So a key contributing indicator to post-secondary enrollment is filling out your FAFSA form. And you can get that data in real time. So taking the FAFSA form completion data and testing different interventions week to week, day to day, getting that real data and making change, that resulted in an 18% increase in FAFSA completion over the 3-month period of FAFSA, prime FAFSA completion for the Multnomah County schools. So they were able to scale that across the district and greatly work to move those contributing indicators and do that work in real time. And we can do that across the board with the type of data that we have. Another great example is from our partnership in Dallas County, which is Commit Partnership. They create hope charts where they're digging deep into the data. I know it's hard to see, but if you can see this, what you see are on this slide is, on the scatter plot, is a number of schools that are outliers. These are lower socioeconomic schools who are outperforming their wealthier school district peers. And so if you get that data and look at that data, you can start to understand what are the interventions, what's happening in that school, what are the bright spots. There are bright spots all over in the work that we're doing, but if we're not really digging into the data and using it in real time to get to those bright spots, we're never going to have the type of outcomes and be able to change the systems we want to change. And so this is more about outcomes improving across the network, which we're really getting to see. But as I mentioned, we have a new strategic plan, and that is all about really doubling down on our work as it relates to equity. And so what Professor Powell shared yesterday and the work of really getting to targeted universalism and helping build the capability of our partnerships to do this, this is going to require what we would say 7 capacities that we build in our network members. Leadership and talent, I've already spoken to. Using new types of data and getting access to better data and creating more data infrastructure is critical. And then how we're using that data to improve practice and to get to better outcomes. Communications and engagement, engaging youth voice in our work. We're just starting to scratch the surface of that with our network members and have a lot to learn from this network as we go forward. And then now the real kind of shift for StriveTogether is our work in our communities across the country are working to influence those systems, to change policy. We have some really great bright spots across the network in how policy is changing, and we want to do more of that, and then build sustainable resources to keep this work going. We know this is not short-term work. There's an incredible sense of urgency to get to the work that we want to get to, but if we're really going to get to our ultimate result, which is getting systems at all sectors, all systems organized around youth, not institutions, we have a long way to go. So we have to be in this for the long haul. We're looking forward. I think it's a great opportunity for me to be here and learn from all of you, and thank you for letting me share my story.
Great, thank you. So what bright spots what data are you using to identify your bright spots, right? Or what kind of leading indicators are you looking at for your PDSAs, which is a new word for me? Plan, do, support.
Study, act.
Study, act. Please, Linda.
I'm feeling very data slide inadequate at this moment. I decided to go without a presentation. So I'm Belinda Gibbs. I'm a principal now at Bloomberg Associates, which is a nonprofit consulting firm that works with mayors. And we do work internationally. About half of our time is here in the US, and the other half is outside the US. And our focus, it's interesting because we're very entrepreneurial. We kind of get to do what we want. We dig into cities, and we connect to mayors on issues that they care deeply about, where they're really looking to tackle challenges and appreciate the support of people who have been in their shoes. I was 30 years in New York City government. I started as soon as I got out of law school and kind of worked my way around various aspects of city government through the child welfare system, through the homeless agency, winding up in a position that I never thought I would ever get, my dream job, to be the Deputy Mayor of Health and Human Services for New York City. And in the process of doing that, became like deeply, deeply committed to using data to inform practice. And so that experience has informed now what I do at Bloomberg Associates, where I decided that I wanted to commit my time, and my colleague, Neil Bliarma, is over here with me today. And so the two of us in particular have committed our time in the US working on issues of racial disparity for young men of color, and partnered specifically with the Obama administration on My Brother's Keeper, and now with the Obama Foundation. And so we went from city to city, helping mayors put together their strategies, typically in partnership with community organizations. I am sure the communities that you represent are cities, in some cases, that we've done work in. And what's the pattern that started to emerge from that practice, quite frankly, I was a little bit taken aback at the highest levels of city government about their own frustration of their own inability to get their hands on the type of disaggregated population level information. I'm now going to, my passion has been around the quantitative population level administrative data, so I could be violating one of Meg's tenets. But this is what drives me crazy, is that these agencies have so much information, and even if they want to use it, they just haven't wrapped their heads around how to get it out there, how to put it into a format that's easier to digest, that's more real time, that's not 5 years later, but is what happened. If I'm a manager of an agency, I want to know what happened yesterday, and maybe last week is okay. But telling me about what happened 6 months ago is, that's like such old news that it's not actionable. And so I was taken aback about how frustrated the top level managers across city government were in their inability to get that kind of data, and kind of frustrated because you see how in the private sector, our information is flying at a pace that you can't even imagine. I can't wrap my head around the advances in how data is being accumulated and managed in the private sector. And so it got us to the point that we really decided if we wanted to try to dig in on an issue. We actually tried to dig on two issues. I won't talk at all about our work on implicit bias, which has been deeply meaningful and important. And so today was just the topic of the panel, data. And so what we decided that we wanted to do was to see if we, in our role as consultants that work nationally, if we could help to build an infrastructure that would create kind of an architectural framework that cities could use in order to feed in their administrative data in real time, disaggregated by race, age, gender, geography, so break it down at a neighborhood level, and produce the kind of information. It's exactly your indicators, the StriveTogether, fantastic organization. When I grow up, I want to be StriveTogether. That same continuum of indicators that were included in the StriveTogether key outcomes, cradle to career, are essentially the same as the My Brother's Keeper indicators. And so having multiple data systems, the school district, the city police department, the county sheriff, the county judge, the probation officer, the office, the juvenile justice agency, the homeless agency, have all of the public agencies agree on feeding their data in as real time as possible, and then do really effective visualizations to make the data much more accessible, and particularly the tailoring it for multiple uses. And so it's interesting because probably a lot of you participate in research studies where you know this kind of data access and integration work is done for unique questions and unique studies. Our goal is to try to make those types of data access not one-offs, but to make them routine and to systematize them, and then to make them available not just to the researchers who are on the study group that are looking at the research, but in fact to open it up to the public so that students can use the data, so parents can use the data, so community groups could use the data, so Strive networks could tap into the data and look at that population level administrative data next to their intervention data, next to the narratives about what's going on in their communities. And so this has been a little bit, sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night worrying about this project and saying, Linda, why did you do this? Why did you put this burden? Because it's really, really hard. And what's hard about it is not the technology. The technology is easy. It's not the data security. The data security is really, really good. It is about the data hoarding culture that pervades public agencies, that puts them in a position of believing that the data is mine. And if you be nice to me and you ask me in the right way, and if I'm in a good mood, maybe I'll agree to share my data for now until you do something wrong, and then I'm going to take it back. And so a lot of the work that we're trying to do is to work at the local level around effective governance and trust building so that the owners, I hate it, I said it, so that the current hoarders of the data come to a position of actually embracing data openness and sharing. And so this is something that we've been, is Oakland in the room? I know that it's one of the Opportunity Youth, maybe they're at the SIF panel, but we're working in Oakland to prototype this. We're working in Houston, in Pittsburgh, in many communities where we've been doing our MBK work in order to lay the groundwork for this kind of data sharing. But it's something like, so then after I sort of toss and turn, and I wake up and I remember I'm in this incredibly unique position of just an opportunity to really add from the Bloomberg Associates point of view, being free to really try to build this and to create this framework and hopefully create a little bit of the glue so that it's cheaper, that the technology knowledge doesn't have to be replicated over and over and over again, and the platform doesn't have to be built over and over and over again, and all the legal questions don't have to be done over and over again. But if we can create kind of a standard approach and then just make it easy for cities to come on board in the sharing of the data. But there's so much going on in all of that, so I just wanted to share kind of the observation and what we're doing, but also very much need to hear ideas that all of you have on how we can build the trust level to get more places willing to buy into this kind of approach.
Thank you, Linda. I love this idea of data hoarders and what we can do to change their disposition to data ownership for quick action.
We need like an AA program for data hoarders. I used to be a data hoarder. I got over it.
I love it. So, Dr. Cooley, tell us about the work that you're doing in bringing both administrative and youth voice data together.
Yes, I'm very excited for just the sequencing of this panel here. So I'll really just start with, let's see if we can get our clicker going there. So today we're here in Renton. See if this little dot will pop up. Just on the edge of Lake Washington. I grew up a few miles from here in southeast Seattle. To K-12 teacher parents in Renton and Kent. So I'm very excited to be here on this esteemed panel and also just in my day-to-day work using my academic training to support the communities that raised me and also working with the many, many partners that make up the Roadmap Project from our districts to our colleges to CBOs. It's been very exciting work to be here locally. So when it comes to our administrative data and our local data hoarding, I completely echo the sentiment of the panel here, where there's a lot of administrative data collected. This will go here. A lot of information collected on our students here, yet so little of it is collected on our education system. Rarely also is this information used for continuous improvement. It's certainly not used for accountability to our local communities. And so as a backbone in this context, a lot of our role at the Community Center for Education Results is to support community questions, kind of being that bridge for information, really being very transparent with our methodologies, and creating very accessible tools. It's very difficult for our parents and partners to navigate state websites to try to compare information. And also being able to kind of source questions from folks who may have some real time, some actions that they'd like to carry out. So using a range of methods based on those questions and creating tools to support local advocacy in a range of efforts that are going on here locally. So we do things like static reports. Here's a couple of our recent reports. We also create online free dashboards of information for our partners to use. They can look at one measure, compare their district to other districts. They can look at subgroups within a school and across districts. They can look at one subgroup of students, how are students directly enrolling in school, and sort that by local high schools, and then also look at trends over time on each. However, we often don't have all the information that we need, so our role has also at times been to collect information. So a lot of our program providers and in our King County Opportunity Youth Network, for youth who are outside of our education system, there's not information for us to really understand how youth are moving to and through local programs. So using just novel data collection can give us a window into how students are doing. And kind of a core philosophy of our work is that data is really only as useful as it is understood, and it's really only as powerful as it is used. So though a lot of our analysis and work are behind computer screens, we're often in conversation with folks and community members, with our local CBOs and partners, listening, being in dialogue, learning, sharing, and also just refining our questions and collaboration. And one of the things that we've learned here locally, kind of at a high level, is that despite the fact that 95% of our high school students say that they want a 2 or 4 year college degree, when we're really tracking students as they go through the education pipeline, we see that these rates really don't match their aspirations. So when we look at a cohort of 9th graders and follow them 9 years after 9th grade, we see that only 31% have achieved a 2 or 4 year degree by their mid-20s. And this is in a region, a knowledge economy, where these degrees are critical. And further, with that point about disaggregation, when we look at our Black youth in this cohort, we see that though their enrollment rates match the region, when it comes to persistence and completion, only 18% of our Black youth, if this last one will go, have earned a 2 or 4 year college degree. So it's for this reason and many others that a few years ago, we began a collaborative effort to really start to understand how outcomes use data and also use collaboration to support Black-led efforts in our region. And so I'll just give a couple of highlights from early on. We were having great conversations with folks at the city and county level. And we also started using our administrative data to really unpack just who are our Black students. We know here locally that our Black students are incredibly diverse. They represent 91 different birth countries. They speak 89 different languages. However, despite this immense diversity of our Black students, when it comes to the enrollment forms that our public schools have, what is that Sesame Street? Like, this thing doesn't look like the other. These forms are truly making our African American, our Somali, our Eritrean, our Ethiopian communities absolutely invisible. So kind of given this challenge, what do we do? What do we do when our administrative data sources are insufficient in these ways? They're insufficient to tell us. They can tell us about our students, but they're not necessarily able to tell us about the settings and systems that are responsible for them, and additionally not able to tell us how our students are experiencing their schools and the structural changes needed to ensure their success. So rather than reproducing data that's often harmful about our Black students, we started with youth themselves, holding focus groups around the region. Just to kind of also echo this point from this Black father, he says, the only way change can happen is when it's internalized by the system. The system is perpetuating the failures. So again, kind of when we start from youth, they can certainly be informants of the context that they're experiencing. So we held focus groups in 3 of our districts, from Kent to Seattle, it'll go, to Tukwila. And these were held on the information that's rarely on the forefront. We were talking about racial identity development, school climate, how families are, feeling like schools are engaging them, and also, more qualitatively, how are students envisioning the learning environments that they'd like to be in. And these are, data points that certainly aren't readily accessible in administrative databases. And so some of our work was creating a resource along with spaces to convene that's centered what students themselves say they want but are currently not receiving. So this report, in addition to lots of meetings and regional convening, were kind of key to really push the momentum of a lot of this work. Well, us as an organization to kind of stay within our backbone function as being support and not leading. So administrative data, and also to kind of underscore a through line in this, was that students called for things that are so incredibly doable. When it came to what students wanted from their learning environments, they wanted teachers that identified with them. They wanted preparation for life beyond high school. They wanted an environment that wasn't just about sitting and passing a test, but environments that emphasized learning and their own autonomy. And they called for being seen in their curricula, having culturally relevant materials and Pan-African history to be visible in what they were learning. So while administrative data is absolutely helpful, it was built by the same goals and biases that underscore our education system. So its capacity alone to really pinpoint the system failures are inherently limited. So we must always start with the insights of our youth, and I'll leave us with this quote. I really like this, how this young man just so cleanly puts it. Adults just need to tell you that you can succeed and then help you get to your goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. A really wonderful example of using youth leadership and youth voice to help us really understand the systemic parameters that are providing barriers. And transitioning to one of the esteemed leaders in this community who has been part and parcel in driving many of these conversations. Hikma, please share your story.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I don't know whose idea it was to have a talk about data at 8 in the morning, but I hope you're still awake. But before I started talking about data, I wanted to give you a little background information about me and I guess what got me to this point. My name is Hikma, again. I'm 20 years old. I'm a college student. In 1 quarter, I will be graduating with my bachelor's degree.
Wow.
Which is exciting. Thank you. I am the oldest of 5. I've been in the U.S. for almost 10 years now. So in 2001, I was born and raised in Ethiopia, I didn't mention that. But in 2001, my parents and my little sister moved to the United States, but left my brother and I back home. with my aunt and uncle because, they didn't know what to expect. Again, they came in 2001 in November, so 2 months after 9/11, so you can imagine what that was like. So they didn't know what to expect. They were coming here with no place to live. They were staying with a family friend for a little bit. They didn't know what to expect when it came to jobs. They didn't have anything lined up, so they wanted to leave us behind, but they brought my little sister because she was only 8 months old then, and they wanted to settle before they brought us along. In 2008, which was about 10 years ago now, they brought my brother and I to the U.S., and that was summer before 6th grade for me. And so I came to the U.S., didn't speak the language, and before y'all ask, I don't know why I don't have an accent. I get asked that a lot. But again, I was in 6th grade, but my brother, who was in 4th grade, was in the same classroom as me. So they, I guess, didn't have that many English learning teachers, so they clumped a whole bunch of us together. So we had 4th, 5th, and 6th graders together in the same room, learning the same subjects, like the exact same thing. So I was supposed to be transitioning into 7th grade, which is middle school, learning in the same classes as 4th grade students. And so that's pretty much how I grew up. I ended up learning the language pretty quickly, so I got out of the ELL classes, went into 7th grade, 8th grade, and then my high school years. And when I was in high school, I attended the 100K Opportunities Fair, and then I met with someone who was in like the community area, connected to SOAR, which has the King County Youth Advisory Council, and that's, I guess, how I got into this work, because I became a member of the council about 2 years ago, and yeah, I guess that's how it started. And then I got connected with King County, and I started doing some work for Best Starts for Kids, and I started getting on like review panels for RFPs and things like that. So that's how I got into this work and got sucked into the world of data. But I guess my first like exposure to data started when my dad was reading some like article or something about Black student success, and I was in middle school or something like that, and he didn't really understand it. I mean, English is a second language, barely he speaks it, but he just noticed how low like graduation rates were for students of color, and so I just remember feeling like, oh my God, like I'm not supposed to, or I'm not expected to succeed, and going into school and being put in a classroom with my little brother, which was so annoying. I hated it. I always felt like I was being underestimated, and so when I saw that data, or when my dad was explaining it to me, I was like, oh my God, I'm not supposed to succeed. I'm not expected to succeed. Like, there's no one around me who thinks I will succeed. And so I always, I'm getting emotional. I always saw myself competing against data. Sorry.
You beat it. Yay.
Thanks. Thank you. But yeah, so I always felt like I was fighting against data. So I'm like, okay, so you expect me not to graduate? Well, I'm going to graduate, but I'm also going to be graduating with my AA as a high school student. And so I tried to do as much as I can to beat data, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Sorry. Ugh. Okay. So, and then in the past few years, I've been working on a few projects with King County, and our executive came in yesterday, and he actually mentioned one of the projects. He talked about the zero youth detention work that our county is doing. So he actually came to one of our meetings for the Children Youth Advisory Board and asked us to put together, thank you, thanks. He asked us to put together a group of people to, I guess, advise that work. And I don't know if you guys know anything about what's happening in King County right now around youth detention, but there's a new justice center, pretty much jail, being built, but then also the county is talking about working on, a path to zero youth detention. And so there's been a lot of talks about that. And so when he came in and asked us to talk about it, everyone was like, okay, how are we working on zero youth detention, but also having this new building for youth to be in detention? So it was an interesting space to be in, but we were putting together recommendations on how things should run moving forward to reach that goal of zero youth detention. And I was in that space that first meeting, and we were talking about, like who's getting into the systems and things like that. And someone was like, oh, the county's doing really great work because our numbers have gone down so much, like we're not having that many youth entering the justice system. And then someone else was like, okay, but like, have you paid attention to the statistics? Almost all the youth entering the system are Black and brown youth. So who's benefiting from the work that the county has been doing? So although the numbers were going down, the disproportionality has gone up a lot. Seattle is like 70% white, but 70% of the students or the young people who are entering the system are people of color. So, and I just remember feeling like, oh my God, where's the data on that? Because I feel like and I explained this to my mom, and I was telling my mom, I was like, Mom, look, this is happening. And she's like, why does no one know about this? Like, why are our communities not being told what's happening? And her first instinct was like, are our kids bad? That's the first thing she said to me, and I was like, no, our system is.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And so we talked a lot about, I was explaining to her, it's not these kids' fault. We're always paying attention to suspension rates, and we're paying attention to who's getting into the system and things like that, but are we paying attention to graduation rates? Are we paying attention to, like you mentioned earlier, like the schools that are actually doing well, who have students of color succeeding, the outlier schools that you mentioned? And we need to look at those schools and say, hey, these schools who actually have students of color succeeding are doing something that we're not. And we need to pay attention to that. And instead of blaming, it feels like, the students are being blamed for not succeeding in schools, but there are students who are actually succeeding in school. So we need to compare those and say, hey, we're doing something wrong, instead of making it feel like the students are doing something wrong. Yeah. So another thing I really wanted to talk about was the history of data in marginalized communities. I feel like there's this perception that like too much data is already being collected without any feedback loops, or like we go to marginalized communities and ask them to relive trauma multiple times over and over again. We have new people, the city comes in, the county, whatever organizations go in and ask these people to relive trauma, and then we don't go back and talk about what is happening in that community. We don't go back to talk about what we can do to resolve whatever data we found. And so a lot of people of color, marginalized communities, don't feel like they can trust anyone when sharing these traumas or their stories and things like that. Another thing is, a lot of times the data collected has been used for evil. I don't know how else to put it, but a lot of data collected from marginalized communities has been used against them. So how do you expect them to trust that you aren't going to do the same thing to them? And so we have to build that relationship with communities before going in and collecting data. And then after that, we have to go back to the communities and say, hey, what does this look like to you? Like, I want you to interpret the data. What do you think we can do to improve whatever issues we're having in these communities? So recently we've been working with the King County Youth Advisory Council on a video project on disproportionality in school discipline. And we were just looking at numbers. Mind you, this is just a small group of young people who are getting together and just looking at all this data, and they're like, wow, our students are getting suspended, or this and this and this is happening. So we're like, how can we inform the community in a way that actually sticks? Because I feel like a lot of times we just get numbers and numbers and numbers. This percent is not succeeding and this percent is doing this, but we don't pay attention to the real people who are behind these numbers. Data becomes so dehumanizing a lot of times, and that's how I felt when my dad was telling me about, this percentage of students are only like succeeding in schools or graduating, whatever, and I was like, who are the students that aren't, which we don't pay attention to? They like in county, they're saying, hey, our county is doing really good work with reducing youth detention, but who are the people who aren't benefiting from the work that you're doing? And so we need to pay attention to the real stories behind the real people that we're representing in data. What else? I think that's pretty much all I had to say. Yeah.
Thank you, Hikma, for your courage and reminding us that we have to be so responsible with the way that we use and present data and the consequences that it has in re-traumatizing our communities. Geneva, somebody that comes from a culture of narrative, I'm curious how data plays out in your community.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, I love that we're having an 8 a.m. discussion about data. And I don't know if you can see me fangirling over everyone on this panel, so thank you all. I feel like I'm with my people. So I want to introduce myself in my native language. I'm a member of the Yurok tribe, and I want to say Ayukui, Skuyanakoi, good morning, hello, Neknau, Geneva Wiki. I come from the village of Rekwoy at the mouth of the Klamath River, in the beautiful redwood forest and in Northern California. And I come from the place where my people have lived since the beginning of time. And I also get to work in my place. And so Del Norte County, California is adjacent to Oregon and is home to 4 federally recognized tribes, Tolowa Dene Nation, which my great-grandfather was Tolowa, Elk Valley Rancheria, Rezagini Rancheria, and then Yurok. And Yurok is the largest, most populous tribe in the state of California. And I also work for the California Endowment, so I'm the place program manager. And for those who don't know, the California Endowment, we are 8 years into a 10-year initiative called Building Healthy Communities, where we'll probably spend about $1.5 billion in 14 communities to try to change the health outcomes of Californians. And so my place is called Del Norte and Tribal Lands, and it includes our whole county plus the entire Yurok Reservation. So in total, about 29,000 people. It is a geographically spread out community. So we are not only a tribal community, we're a very, very rural community. And our population is predominantly white, but also includes Hmong community, Latino community, and then our Native community. And so there are threads among everything that you said that I feel like I could share, and I want to just tell a few stories to sort of add a little bit of local context and nuance to support all of your, especially the theory and the big picture pieces, and just sort of bring it on home. So the California Endowment, so we launched in 2010, and we believe that we are going to change health outcomes when the people most affected know how to change systems and policies. And we are, blatantly have a health equity agenda as a private health foundation. And so this is a picture of 2 of our young people in our community, and we launched community organizing. And I know we talked a little bit yesterday about youth organizing as part of sort of what's happening next. And to be really honest, we had to build a youth organizing infrastructure basically from scratch. And a lot of our sort of social service partners at the table, with our Opportunity Youth Network or others, hung on the edge of the continuum of youth engagement, but we're not really doing transformative youth organizing. And so we just started it. The backbone just started doing it. And so this is the story of, so this is a group of young people who are system involved youth in some way or another. We ran this out of Coastal Connections, which is sort of like a teen center-ish, funded by public health with mental health prevention funding. And it was a summer project through our Youth Training Academy. And we had a professional adult community organizer working with a group of young people. And we're agnostic about what they work on, right? We believe that when young people have a sense of self-efficacy, that they believe that they can make a change, that they are going to be healthier. And so we had just lost 2 young Native women in a drunk driving accident right before this project launched. And so they said, we want to work on teen drinking, and let's look at our data. So we pull our data, and Del Norte County has a higher than average teen drinking rate on a whole bunch of ways that you can look at that data. And so they started the community organizing process, and they went and met with a whole bunch of people who have power and money and resources in our community who are supposed to be helping keep kids safe from dying from drinking. And so they did, great research meetings. They really went into the data, and then they said, listen, we know the truth. The truth is we go to Safeway and we steal huge amounts of alcohol. Not one single adult that they talked to, or any adult who'd been trying to work on teen drinking in our community, ever said kids are stealing huge amounts of alcohol at Safeway. It was not on the adults' radar. So they were doing all these other different kinds of interventions and ideas to try to curb teen drinking. And the teens, so in this meeting, the bald man in the front is the manager of Safeway. And there are 200 people in this room that you can't see. And so the young people present their data. They tell their personal stories of, I went and stole alcohol from Safeway and my cousin died, or my cousin is in juvie now, or whatever. This is why this is important to us. And we want you, the manager of Safeway, to let us show you how we steal alcohol with police present, and then we want you to shut it down. And so in front, and they had public officials there and everything else. And so because they did a very thoughtful, intentional, disciplined research, organizing model, the Safeway store manager had already been in conversation with them and knew this was coming, right? So this was not a gotcha moment. So he had already gotten permission, but in front of 200 people, got to say, yes, I will do that. So not only did they shut down, so now there are all kinds of interventions at Safeway. They then could just walk over to Walmart. We don't really have grocery stores, so it was easy to shut down the whole market because there are not very many. And said, Walmart, will you follow suit? Absolutely. And now 6 years later or something, CVS came to town and the County Board of Supervisors said, you can only come Safeway if you also implement these same measures to prevent alcohol theft. Yeah, awesome. But here's the other piece. Young people then made a movie. If you go to YouTube and look at Del Norte and Tribal Lands Youth Alcohol Curb Drinking or something, the youth made a 5-minute movie about this. And so the adults were going to take credit for the CVS thing the other day. And we had to say, oh, no, that did not come from you. And then could just flip the movie onto Facebook and reshare with the world that, no, in fact, this is really youth-driven. So that's one story. So, and another one quickly that I just have to share with the tribal context. So remember that we're a private health foundation. I'm the only Native in my organization. We have one Native on our board. Our offices are in LA and Oakland. And so when we started organizing on the upper part of the Yurok Reservation, where we don't have telephones and electricity for the majority of the reservation, right? So we're talking as rural and remote as you can imagine, and absolutely beautiful, and extreme poverty. When we said, what do we want to work on together, the community residents, including young people and other folks, said, we want to implement prescribed forest fires. So then I got to go back to the California Endowment and say, we're going to burn the land as one of the first things out the gate. But this is why. To really do a racial equity agenda, we have to lean all the way in and deeply listen. And part of it also is about this root cause analysis. So we can look at the quantitative data of the folks on the upper reservation and know that we have, higher than average suicide rates and drug abuse and child neglect. The community could have easily said, like, let's have more rehab, let's have more tutoring. But instead we said, let's really pull back the layers to understand, like, what is really happening in our community. And so to close the loop for those who may not have already leapt there, in order to have our traditional food sources and basket materials, items that we need for our cultural ceremonies, like my babies were carried in a basket that I don't know how I would be a mom without being able to tie them up and carry them around in this basket, where I could literally have my baby sleeping in this room in the middle of a meeting because she's secure in her basket. We have to manage the land in a way that's going to allow our traditional food sources and basket materials to grow, and also to attract the kinds of wildlife that needs to be able to thrive to feed our bodies and to feed ourselves. And so to not be able to, so traditionally for 10,000 years, we burned our land in ways that allowed for different kinds of landscapes. And for the last 300 years, that has really been suppressed. We won. We now have controlled, prescribed burns. We also have a movie about that you can also find on Facebook. But that was, it took a huge amount of interagency work to be able to get that to happen. And it's real, and it's sustainable, and it's happening. And it also had to take a leap of faith of my funder, my organization, to be able to say, okay, we get it. We can support that. The other I just wanted to say about community organizing, and also like this work that we do in terms of collective impact and bringing folks together. And you talked about like I often joke you can get a free lunch every day at the Wichpeg Tribal office to go let your voice be heard, to provide some sort of community engagement or input on some federal grant application, right? Like you can just rock up any day and let your voice be heard and like get a free sandwich. And that's not good enough, right? And it's also like if we can get in a room and say, oh, what's the problem? We're looking at all this data. People would say, let's have rehab, let's have tutoring. Right? It's to be able to have like real conversations. So when we talk about human-centered design, like actually going and sitting with young people and say, tell us about your day, tell us about your life, tell us about your experience at school, what's really going on with you. One of the most powerful pieces that we found, and this is something that we were not, as the California Endowment, we were not prepared for this piece to come out, is the need for healing in those conversations. And so like for the tribal community, especially in the context of workforce development and education, right? Virtually everyone of a certain generation in my community, including my great-grandma, who I'm named after, was forcibly removed from their homes and sent far away to boarding schools where they were told it's not okay to be an Indian, and you can't speak your language, and you can't practice your customs or your religion. Like they were gone, like my grandma was gone from the time she was 6 until she was 16. Like it was a very effective policy. Those systems were really well designed to try to eradicate a group of people, right? And so all of that lives on our hearts and minds. And part of what happens when we bring people together and we ask to share those stories, if we're doing it really well and intentionally and thoughtfully and deliberately, it is creating a place to heal. But then there's all the other pieces about, so then what is the infrastructure that we're putting around, especially like these vulnerable young people, to make sure that they can take that mic and tell a hard story and be really honest and vulnerable and open, and that on the other side of it, we're actually helping that be a path to healing and empowerment and self-efficacy and not something else. And right, that's our burden. That's our burden. And so I get really excited when I hear we're going to double down or do a deep dive, I think Steve said, on youth organizing. And I really want to get to, so how are we going to make sure that we have the infrastructure to make this really successful? I actually had 2 more slides. But my colleagues have done such a beautiful job that I don't even think I need to show them. So we've used a human-centered design approach to really get to these the deep stories, to really understand and really engage young people and their families about what's really happening in their communities, and to really do that root cause analysis. We've also used visuals to be able to make visible what we've learned. So it's not just, I'm going to come extract this data and you're never going to hear about it again. It's how do we take the the deep insights that we've heard from a whole bunch of different stories to then really understand what needs to change in the system, or what are the policy interventions that then we all as a community can understand, can have empathy around, and then we can own them. And what we found again and again and again in both the Opportunity Youth work, but in the Building Healthy Communities broader work, is when we make that visible and we have service providers and teachers and systems leaders. Somebody said systems are made up of people. When people who have the power to make changes have the opportunity to really step in and feel the feeling, like feel the pain of the lived experience of the other humans in our community, that they move. And so when we talk about like we can change policy and it will not necessarily change hearts or minds or behavior, we have found that empathy is a tool, is a way, when done well and done like authentically, that we can then get to like really meaningful implementation that actually advances an equity agenda.
Yay.
I'll stop there.
Incredible. Well, we have about, I believe this is the clock to the end of the session. Is that correct?
They just zeroed you
Wow,
out.
we've just zeroed down to 8 minutes. Does that mean 8 minutes till the end of the session? Okay. I'm obviously excellent at timekeeping. Why don't we open it? There must be some, just incredible resources, incredible thought-provoking ways to consider the spectrum of quantitative to qualitative, rigorous data on both aspects, the narrative dimensions, the trauma, and the intentional stewardship of information and narrative. There have to be some burning questions in the audience before, yes, a very quick hand went up, so.
Absolutely. Hi, first of all, this is an amazing panel. Thank you guys so much. So we're Thrive Chicago. We are a proud Strive, Cradle of the Career backbone, and the OI backbone in Chicago, as well as a 100K city. Thank you so much for sharing on this qualitative and quantitative data front. But one of my questions is to you, Linda. In Chicago, we've successfully combined K-12 administrative data with out-of-school time provider data, and the current audiences are the out-of-school time providers and the Chicago Public School teachers and principals. And we are legally bound to keep that data within that sphere currently. Just that has been an incredible accomplishment, given that it's real-time access. So I'm very interested, even at a high level, how you've been able to navigate taking that to the next level in sharing with parents and students.
The critical, our approaches start with the easiest stuff, because even that is hard. And so when the data is shared publicly, it's population level information. So it's not information about a single individual. There are ways to legally do that, but you have to be provisioned in the security, and you have to have a legal right to see the individual information. And the data trust issues are huge. Like, how are you using my data, and is it going to be used against me? And so we're starting with population level information built in a way that you can't, like the smart young techies can't go in and re-identify, because there's amazing things that people do to do that. And so the critical thing is that, so we're actually sharing between the school district and the city, and in Oakland where we are, and a community-based service provider, First 5 Alameda. We don't have the county on board yet. I'm not giving up, but the county's not on board. But a big part of it is just giving them the assurance that the information will be at the population level. They're eager for it. They're very willing participants. And what we needed to convince them is that we had the security of the architecture built in a way that protects them, that they're not violating or coming at any risk of violating their legal obligations to protect that individual level information. And that the data sharing MOU is kind of, sealed as tightly as possible, that all eventualities are considered. And this is the fact that jurisdictions are doing that same work over and over and over again from scratch, that we hope to overcome, that we can create kind of a model and say, look, we did it here, it's doable, it's achievable, and then to be able to take it elsewhere. But it all comes back to the people who have to sign the MOU, everybody holds a veto right. And we have to get to the conversation to a place of trust, and there's a lot of risk-taking, because when you put that information out publicly, I love, this is a mayor, oh goodness, I can't remember the city. I can remember the city. It's East, no, I can't. He said, it wasn't a mayor, it was a chancellor. He's the school superintendent. He said, I cannot make my system change. I cannot get system reform. My approach is I'm going to put all my data out there, because if I put a spotlight, then hopefully people will be as enraged as I am and help me make change. And that's the kind of attitude that we want to see our public leaders take. That putting the information out there, that's the act of bravery and leadership that we want. And protecting yourself because you're afraid of criticism is doing harm to your students or whoever you're serving in your system. So it's about building trust, but also getting that shift in mental attitude and courage to expose yourself to the problems that are going to be seen by everybody.
While we're looking for another question, I just wanted to see if anyone else has any lessons learned or tidbits to share about how to bring back data to the community, to the stakeholders, maybe to the community that you drew the data from in a highly respectful way.
I mean, I think just building those integrated data systems can be critical, and really starting with who those close partners are, and building agency around that information, and kind of a sense of ownership that lives outside of the organization. So yeah, I totally agree.
Other burning questions from the audience? This is usually not a shy room. All right.
No, I want to come back to something. Tell me your name again. Hikma. I wanted to come back because I think you said some of the most important things in this discussion this morning. But I think the one thing that government is really bad at is even when we're well-intentioned, we don't always explain ourselves. And the importance of saying we're doing this for these reasons, so that people can see and can judge and can question whether the reasons are authentic and legitimate and for the public good. And so there's two parts to that. Make sure that what you're doing with the data is in fact for good. And just remember to tell people what you're doing. Communication is so underappreciated in government. I mean, we're so busy sometimes. I great admiration for people who work in government. I think there's incredible bravery involved in it. But sometimes you're running after the next crisis and you don't remember to invest the time and effort into going back and telling people, hey, remember that conversation? Here's where we are. Here's the next step. What do you think? Give us some feedback. And keeping the community involved is so critically important.
Great. So we have just a few more minutes, and I'm actually going to ask, this is clearly a conversation that needs to and will continue. I hope that you see these incredible leaders as resources for that conversation, as there are many resources in the room. We do want to leave a little bit of time for our spoken word artists, but I'm hopeful that we can just go along the way, and we don't have to go in the same order if you don't like to. But one of the questions that we had was about, reflecting on the barriers and progress achieved, and if there's a lesson or two that you really want the audience to walk away with in our back pocket as we continue the conversation about targeted universalism and setting a universal goal. I'll look at me if you want to go first. Thank you.
The slide I didn't share at the end was after we did a bunch of interviews and did deep insights, we created, and we've done it in a couple of different initiatives now, but created some sort of big visual that was that compelling future state. And so also to answer that, how do you bring the data back? So first, bringing back the big insights to community to really practice with them, test them with them, refine them with them before they're all fancy, like when it's still like handwritten note on a big piece of butcher paper so people can really engage. And doing like gallery walks and like taking that to different places around the community so different people can come and interact is one. And then workshopping with community, like, so what is the ideal future state? So we feel we can now understand the pain of these journeys or these experiences, but what do we really, really want? And then we tied that qualitative right back to quantitative and then set shared goals, like really big, ambitious goals. So one of our goals in our work is that all third graders will read on grade level by 2023. So we call it 3 Read 23. And like the teachers said, we can't get 100%. And the superintendent said, no way. If I even say 98%, I know exactly like which brown kid on the reservation is going to think I'm the kid who's left out. Yeah. And then taking those big goals, and again, because the quantitative goals were rooted in the lived experiences of the kids and families and teachers, be able to make that both what's currently happening, but also that compelling future vision really, really visible. And we had every tribal council, the city council, the county board of supervisors, nonprofit organizations. We made them we did a formal presentation that made them formally adopt our campaign and our goals together. So now we all are in it together, and then we all have a role to play.
Wonderful.
And I also want to add on, like, I feel like even more than just going back to the community and asking for feedback, I think it's really important to include the community in the data collection process. Yes. So if you're collecting data about young people need to be involved in that. But they won't do it for free.
That's right.
I feel like adults have this misconception that we are willing, we just need experiences and things to put on our resume, so we'll do things for free. No, we're not doing that anymore. Young people are very fed up, and we're at the point where we're like, we don't really need adults, so we'll just get together. I'm speaking this from like the conversations I've had with the young people here. We're at a point where we're like, you know what, we can do our own thing. We really don't need adults. So if you really want the youth voice, you have to pay for it. Beautiful. And because you're willing to pay other adults who are doing the exact same thing, so it doesn't make sense to not pay.
Yep, that's right. Great.
Yeah, and also I really wanted to add on that as adults, what was I gonna say? I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
Shall we come back to you?
You know what? You can go ahead, and I'll come back to what I was gonna say.
Dr. Cooley, lesson learned. We're gonna come back to you, Hikmat. Write it down when it comes back.
That sounds good. I think absolutely centering and starting with youth and you know, honoring their voice and insights and treating, you know, their insights as a consultancy. I think we can learn so much. But also knowing that graphs and figures alone aren't, you know, impartial. They're not devoid of bias. And so when we're putting out information, we want to do that in a way that doesn't mobilize bias, that doesn't reconfirm, you know, those mindsets that we're often trying to challenge. So I think both in how we do data work, using analysis, not just leaning too much on descriptive data, where I think a lot of those narratives can still be perpetuated. So I'd say, you know, strong analysis and good framing, really understanding what are the causal factors of this phenomena. And if not fully, you know, articulated, some quality framing around how you want folks to use and understand the information.
Wonderful. Linda, 30 seconds.
Well, and just on this question of the targeted universalism, in government, practically speaking, it's the way you have to go because you can't discriminate. And so the disaggregating the data to really highlight, and it's such a trick to highlight the disparities in outcomes in a way that doesn't create like more negative labeling over subpopulations, but that gives the information so that people will know how to target interventions in a way that you can get to the quality of outcomes. It's a real trick, but you can't do it without that disaggregated data.
Yeah, and I think what I'm reflecting on, and I was thinking a lot about this yesterday when John Powell was speaking, is that equity 1.0 and where we have been around closing gaps is not good enough. We heard this from our network as we worked to put in place our new strategic plan at StriveTogether a year ago. We have, I didn't mention this, we have 5 proof points currently. I talked about proof point. It's inside baseball with StriveTogether, but it's outcomes improving and systems change. We have those examples. but it's not, and we'll likely have 10 of these communities by the end of the year. It means nothing. What we heard from our network members is this isn't good enough because we have to get to that systems transformation. So that theory of action that you saw is going to have a new column that's about systems transformation. What does that look like? That's Equity 2.0. We're not there, but I feel there's promise because we're on that journey, and there's 69 communities plus this network of incredible communities working towards that. So we're not even close, and we need youth to help guide us, and so I feel good about that, but we're on this path, and it's giving me hope.
Yeah, just to wrap it up, I guess, I was just going to add on that my favorite thing about the Start With Us project is that it's about putting young people at the center and beginning of whatever you're doing. And so, you may have the expertise in, data collection, but we have the expertise in our communities. And it's really important that whoever you are collecting data on are the center of the project.
Start with us. Thank you. Thanks to our panel. All right. I'm going to pass it. We do have our spoken word artist. Yes. So thank you again to our panel, and thank you guys. I know that we're running just a few minutes late, but I do want to introduce and close with our spoken word artist, Cornelius Cambronero. Yes, all right. From Youth Speak Seattle and the Arts Corps and Totem Star. Cornelius, welcome to the stage.
Blue. Oh, it's on. Okay. Good morning. I came in here earlier at 7, and all you guys really looked super tired and asleep, and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to get on the stage, and everybody's just going to be like, what's that young guy saying up there? But again, my name is Cornelius Cambronero. I'm here representing Youth Speak Seattle, Arts Corps, and Totem Star. And yeah, the piece that I'm going to be sharing today is basically just about my experience. It has a lot of relation to arts education and to social justice, gentrification, racial injustice, just a lot of things that I've seen growing up in the South Seattle community and stuff that I just, see in media and in society today. And basically it's just my take on it and my stance. And here it is. Natural born sinner, hope I make it up to heaven. Where kids be making wishes like it's 11:11. When I look up at the stars, I swear they ain't that far. We weren't born to be sinners, we were born to be gods. I'ma take it back to those days. I'm talking about the time where hip-hop was making waves. Ain't talking about trap and I ain't talking about rap. Let me call Clay Bennett, tell him bring the Sonics back, stating facts. Working my way up from the basement. Money ain't the motive and it ain't what I'm chasing. Segregation, racism, gentrification, they keep killing, keep pointing fingers at us like we really the villains, Lord willing. Sometimes I question all of my stress. Then I realize God's training me to be the very best. Gunshots at night, still grinding in despite. It ain't right, this ain't life, can't sleep without a light. I think about this life, then think about my brothers, my mothers, my pops, when these killings gonna stop. Are you a hero or a cop? Criminals of permission. Say they want some salmon, but for bodies while they fishing. Addiction. Got teens doing drugs, but they don't know no better cause at home they get no love. Said it ain't about the money, not at all about the fame. K-I-N-G, just trying to change the game. As the rain falls, I think of all the ones we lost. America got money, but not enough for these costs. People keep dying as the globe keep crying. Teens skipping school, giving up and not trying. And now I wonder why I am alive and well. We fighting for our rights, some of us ending up in jail. This whole world, I don't trust it. Ain't nobody free without no action to some justice. Starting up this ruckus, but it all depends. Cops killing a brother cause he's chilling in his Benz. You wear that badge, but you do not wear it with honor. You beating up on girls, bringing hatred in our world. Don't really know why or understand why they do it. I swear I just pick up my pen and put it in my music. I'm writing just to change the game above the influence. Brothers and my sisters, proudly I stand with you. No justice, no peace till we fix the bigger picture. Wish that they were with us, together join hands. Our faith is in our Lord and his big and better plans. Time's getting rough, truly only can get better. We grind until the sun comes up cause we don't know no better. Flowing like Mother Nature, just trying to change the weather. The only way to change the system is together. Thank you.
The only way to change the system is to do it together. Thank you all very much for an incredible morning. Please make your way to the next breakout session. And thank you, Cornelius, for that inspiration to fuel our way.